webinars. One was on human-centered design, and the second one was on the innovation mindset and the 3 E's that are a part of that. Those are empathy, experimentation, and empowerment. And when we asked people if they would like, what topic of those 3 E's would they like more information and time on, and the resounding winner of that was experimentation. So here we are today. Implement, and Michaela, if you could advance to the next slide, that would be terrific. Thank you. And just wanting to give the definition of innovation that is part of MnDOT's innovation strategy. So when we are thinking about innovation, we are talking about how we use critical and creative thinking to implement ideas that create value for the public that we serve and also our own work. And then I think the next slide is about that innovation mindset, the experimentation, empathy, and empowerment. So today we are here to delve a little deeper into experimentation. Experimentation is so important and integral to the whole process of innovation. It's a step that allows us to determine if our ideas have value. We experiment because we want to know if something's going to go forward, and whether an experiment goes according to how we think it might, or whether it leads us in another direction. Both of those, whether we call them or think about them as successes or failures, both of those have tremendous value in them. And I want to draw, before we kind of hear from our panelists later, we want to set the stage to kind of get our own minds around this world of experimentation. And we have 3 resources as well that we are going to be sharing and making available. Michaela, if you could show that slide, that'd be terrific. Oops, my bad. We were starting with the video, but can we do the resources first, since we already mentioned them? Thank you, and sorry about that.
Let me see if it will let
Yeah, no problem. Would it be easier if we can back up and do the video? Oh, okay. Yeah, so the resources that we wanted to be able to share with you and share as a reference after this webinar, there are 3. The first 2 are from a place called the, excuse me, the innovation, why am I blanking here? Give me 1 second. Global Innovation, Board of Innovation, excuse me, sorry, it just, they are a global firm that work with individuals, with institutions, with corporations around the connections between innovation and impact. And the 2 resources, the first is an experiment card that is a useful tool that can help start to formulate the steps of the innovation that you would want to pursue. So the innovation card or the experiment card, it's a really quick and easy reference to kind of jumpstart innovation. What's the description? What do you want to do? What's involved in that? The steps. And as Michaela noted, these will be sent after our innovation webinar today, and they're also available on our Innovation Teams channel. The second one is the experimentation picker. And that's kind of a tool that looks at a roadmap for an innovation. And it starts by asking the question, what is the real world problem that your experiment is trying to learn about or solve? So it's very geared around problem solving and formulating some lead questions for experiments. Both of those I've found helpful in just thinking about organizing some pieces of work. And hope you do too. The third reference was actually included in the MnDOT's Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Their recent newsletter referenced a book called The Right Kind of Wrong, The Science of Failing Well. And you can find that book in our MnDOT library. You can also contact Michaela or myself if you have any questions following up. But it explores innovation and experimentation a little bit more deeply, and also connects to what we will be sharing this afternoon. So I hope those 3 resources will prove useful to you in the future. And Michaela, if we want to start with, go back to the video, to kind of think about and jumpstart our thinking around experimentation, we're going to just play a very short 5.5-minute video about experimentation and the different ways that people do that. Some are very hands-on. They might take a machine apart, literally. Some might build a prototype. There are so many different ways to immerse in experimentation, and it's kind of what we wanted to accomplish here today, to really provide multiple perspectives and entry points into that. Feel free to comment in the chat about anything that you enjoy from the video. So here we go. Thank you.
Innovators are experimenters, not in a white lab coat in the lab sort of experimentation, but with the idea that a lab sort of experimenter might have, which is, I have a hypothesis about the world. What if, how might? And they go out and explore the world to figure out, is it true? Now, there are 3 ways in which they explore the world. The first way is they just try out new experiences. So Howard Schultz, many years ago, was working in the coffee industry, selling coffee grinding machines. He's on a trip to Italy in order to go to a conference about coffee and coffee grinding. He skips out of the conference meetings. He goes to different coffee shops. He's totally surprised by the taste, the smell, the experience, the socialness of it. And he ended up staying there 2 weeks, completely immersing himself in the experience of this new stuff of coffee that he had in Italy that he'd never had before anywhere else in the world. Then he goes back and creates what we know now as Starbucks coffee. Now, again, it doesn't have to be somebody famous. It could be somebody like a guy named Nate Alder, who's a snowboarder. He lives in cold weather. He loves to be up in that cold sort of world of snowboarding and mountains. He was on vacation one time in Brazil, and he loves also to scuba dive, but he'd never gone really deep, where you have to have a dry suit that your body's dry. The wet suit, which is really a dry suit, keeps your body warm inside so it's not as cold. In between that dry suit and your skin, they put argon gas. It's heavy gas. It keeps you warm when you're down there in that deep, cold water. Did the dive in Brazil, had a great time, came up, was going on the boat back to the shore. He's thinking about what it was like down there deep under. And he's thinking about what it's like to be on top of a mountain when it's freezing cold. And he realized, what if we took that argon gas that they put in those dry suits underwater, and we created the whole clothing line for people like me who love to snowboard? Well, that's what he did. It's called Climate. They make vests, coats, pants, etc. You put this argon gas in. It's really a thin piece of outer clothing. Keeps you super warm, incredibly successful. All that comes from trying something different and having that experience then lead to a new idea. Other innovators, they love to just take things apart. Page, one of the founders of Google, he did this ever since he was a kid. He was in his early teens, even a little bit younger than that. His brother gave him some tools, screwdriver and other things. He ended up then going out in the garage when his parents were gone, lifted off power tools, saws, drills, etc. off the shelves, used his tools to pull those things apart. He just wanted to know, how did they work? And he spread them all over the floor of the garage, never put them back together, but he got his answers, which was, what's going on inside of there and what could I learn from it? That's how some innovators get their ideas, just by taking things apart. The third way that they experiment is essentially by creating prototypes and trying new stuff. The founders of a company called Rent the Runway basically discovered that idea initially by one of their sisters who was thinking of going to a pretty nice party, had a good job, she was making a decent income, but she didn't have enough money in order to buy a high-end designer dress. And then she had the novel idea, what if we rented people really high-end designer clothing? Well, it would be expensive to buy all that clothing and to start the business, so they prototyped, they experimented. Here's the first experiment. They bought a few dresses. They took them to a college campus and let young women try the dresses on, high-end, good quality designer dresses. They tried them on. Will you rent them? Yes, they did. So the first question was, will they rent high-end designer dresses? That was answered. The second question they had to figure out was, will they bring those expensive designer dresses back in good condition and not steal them? They did. They got them back. So first hypothesis was tested. People will rent high-end designer dresses. The second experiment for them was different campus, different set of college students. In this case, they put the designer dresses out. They could touch them, they could see them, but they could not try them on. The question was, will they rent high-end designer dresses if they can't try them on? Fewer people did, but quite a few still rented. And they brought them back in good condition, didn't steal them. Third and final experiment to figure out, is this a business that could work, was don't put the dresses out there, but they took pictures of the dresses and asked people in a different college campus, would you rent this dress? And the answer was yes, about 5% of the time. That's enough in the internet business to make good money. Those three experiments led to the company Rent the Runway, which now has had venture capital investment of over $40 million. It's incredibly successful, but it's that spirit and action of experimentation that led them to get great new ideas.
Great. So some of the things from that video of just, using experimentation to test a hypothesis and hearing some different examples of how that happens in different fields. So as we were putting our thoughts together for this innovation hour today, we reached out across MnDOT to think about experimentation in three ways, three connected ways, I should say, with people, with products, and with processes. So I want to introduce and share the individuals who will be sharing their thoughts and experiences on experimentation. And we have noted here experimentation in community engagement, and my real thanks to TJ Melchor and my Xiong, who are stepping in for their colleagues. So thank you for being willing and flexible to do that and share your experiences in community engagement. Robin Rust will be sharing her work experimenting in the area of business integration. And we have one of our research implementation projects on solar snow fencing. Kohl Skalin will be here sharing that process. And just to kind of give you a heads up, we've asked each of these groups to take about 10 minutes, and we put together a set of guiding questions that our panelists were just choosing questions that they wanted to share about, and they are certainly welcome to explore others as well. So just to know that we might not be touching upon all of these questions this afternoon, but just put them together to think about experimentation. So each group will have about 10 minutes to share, and then we'll have time for some questions at the end. So I want to turn it over to our first group. And again, even though the respective areas are noted separately, those people, products, and processes are really all connected to varying degrees throughout the experimentation process. So I'm going to hand it over to Mai and TJ to talk to us a little bit about community engagement. So thank you.
All right, great. Thanks. Hi, my name is TJ Melchor, so I'll be joining Mai here. I'm going to take the first kind of half of this, and then I'll speak about some activities we did up here in Bemidji, and then turn it over to Mai. So I help take care of community engagement for MnDOT in Northwest Minnesota. So I'm in District 2, kind of based out of Bemidji. And as we talk about innovation, one of the things that we want to look at is some things that we had to come up with in order to better integrate or better increase trust within a community? And actually, it's right here at home. So in Bemidji, we dial back to like 2018, right? And if I look at these questions, I want to start with maybe what were some challenges, a failure, or a setback, and because that's what led the building blocks to this this kind of whole innovation here in engagement. In 2018 and 19, we did a corridor study in the community of Bemidji on Highway 197, and ended up kind of recommending or going with a very controversial project. And we thought that we really took the appropriate steps to garner support within the community. But by the end of it, it was evident that we didn't. There was a significant pushback in the business community, and specifically, we kind of lost our trust with the community, its leaders, and its business owners. Meanwhile, there's still a project that has to be done and be out there. And so we have to figure out, how do we do this in a different way? So we came back a couple years later, started the study from scratch, but this time we started to integrate more with some community-based organizations. And in particular, we worked with the local RDC, the Headwaters Regional Development Commission. And instead of this being a MnDOT corridor study, what we looked to frame it as was more of a community study and how we interact with this corridor and what the future of it should look like. And so we asked the HRDC to really lead this process. And so we worked with the HRDC. We helped to provide the content. We had a consultant engineer on board, and so we take care of all of the technical analysis and the content that goes along with it. But really, the HRDC helps facilitate these meetings and bridge the gap between us and the community. And so it was a unique way to integrate with them to lead things. The second factor that was, how do we better reach out to some of the communities within our community that we have trouble with? And in particular, it'd be a lower income community. Whether it's they don't have the resources or they think that their voice isn't important, but they don't necessarily come to our events, or they take part or they don't take part in our virtual activities, like a virtual survey or interacting with the websites or whatnot. So it's been a challenge to connect with those groups within town, and really it's for a number of reasons. When you look at the connections at this part of the community, it's more apt to be negative or stressful within those communities. When they interact with institutions like a state agency, it can be that they're interacting with the police, they're interacting with hospitals, or interacting with mental health support or other support organizations. And so they just kind of see MnDOT as another one of those state agencies, and just a lot of skepticism that's there. So as part of this project, we took the opportunity to figure out how we can better connect with these groups, and we did it through two different ways. One was with the Ridgeway Neighborhood Initiative, and this is a lower income community. The Rotary Club really began this effort, and it's to support the community and build trust amongst those residents with low income in that neighborhood and the surrounding areas. And what they've done is they bring together all these different organizations in order to try and increase that trust. So the police force, you look at the different county services, city services, state services, we all kind of come together, and it's not necessarily to advance a project. So we can answer questions about the project, but ultimately our presence at these picnics in this neighborhood is really just to build trust and just to show them we have MnDOT branding there, we can show the state agency, and then that way they can see that their interactions with these different municipal agencies don't necessarily all have to be stressful. It can be something that's fun. And so you take part in activities, they serve food there. And so just try to make it a fun atmosphere. It kind of replicates what happens when we meet with these groups at, say, the Beltrami County Fair, right? It's a much different dynamic in there in which we're trying to get people to have fun. And then as they're having that fun, we can start to begin those conversations that we need to have to either gain their input or be able to just pass along some information that may be important to them as well. The third instance I want to just wrap up quickly is called the Peacemaker Grants. And what it is, it's led by the Headwaters Regional Development Commissions, and it's specific listening sessions by that organizations in which different community organizations commit to taking part in listening sessions. So again, we're not advancing or bringing information to it, but we're there to listen. And there's a rotating agenda of ideas or questions that they will address in those, but it allows us to be able to integrate with another community, another organization, and be able to gather that information of stuff that they're just answering and giving their input. So those are some 3 unique ways that we approached that project here in Bemidji to try and just increase our trust there. Now, I'll take a moment here and just turn it over to Mai, and she's going to let us know that her experience is here as well.
Hi, everyone. My name is Xiong, and I work out of Metro District in the Office of Communication and Engagement. Specifically, I'm the communications manager on the East 7th Arcade project. And if you guys are familiar with where East 7th Street and Arcade Street is, it is on the east side or eastern metro of the Twin Cities, just directly east of downtown St. Paul. This is a really diverse area. The project itself is about 4.5 to 5 miles of road that goes from downtown St. Paul, the very edge of downtown St. Paul, up to the east side, and then kind of turns north for Highway 61 and goes about another 3 miles up that way. So it's not only is it geographically diverse, but it's also very ethnically diverse as well. And as we were doing business outreach along this project corridor, we were coming up, we were having issues with making sure that information about the project was getting out there. So even we were trying a lot of different tactics, sending out flyers, going door to door, holding our public meetings, making sure using the data that was available to us. Particularly, we used, we really used the St. Paul Schools data site to kind of determine the languages that were spoken along the corridor, as well as like the ethnic groups that were living along the corridor. It's a really great data site that kind of they can break it down to like, at the different schools, like what students are coming from which part of town, as well as each school, the schools along the corridor, what are the top languages that are spoken in that school. So we really use that to determine what languages we were going to translate our materials into. So that was one thing, one thing that we did to make sure that we were reaching the right people. Making sure that that there were interpreters at our public meetings or when we were going out to the public as well. But we were discovering that we weren't really hearing from, the business owners. Typically, we're holding we hold our public meetings or open houses, between 4 to 6 p.m. And that's usually a good time for most residents, but not a good time for a lot of the business owners. And so we really wanted to do some targeted business outreach, and we identified the language needs. So we held a Latino business meeting as well as an Asian-owned business meeting. And because of the ethnic diversity and along the corridor, along the project, we knew that we had to we had to build relationships and work with a lot of different local community-based organizations in the area. So there was a lot of time spent building relationships with, with people already doing work in the project area and building those relationships. We held the Latino business meeting with the Latin Economic Development Center. We held the Asian-owned business meeting with the Hmong Chamber of Commerce and Highway Credit Union, as well as the Eastside Area Business Association. And then, we went out to the community and we were sharing with them, these meetings that we were holding. And that was when we learned that, we were like, there was another group that we had missed. So we were initially trying to meet a language need, but there was also another cultural or ethnic group that we had missed, which was the, Black-owned businesses. And at that time, kind of sharing this, it's, I think, acknowledging that, that there's always more to do, that you're always learning. That was another huge part of this as well. So learning that, the Black-owned business network did not work with, a specific business association, and they only worked with another community organization. We partnered with them and held a Black-owned business meeting. So I would say, like, a huge part of this was also creating a space for people to be comfortable speaking in, because if at our public meetings, we always made sure to have interpreters available, but not a lot of people would speak up. And so, having a targeted business or meeting for a specific group really helped to, create a space that would be safe for dialogue. And just a couple things I want to share here as well is, I think something that along with what TJ shared was, just being out in the community. I think one thing that I learned, as I was trying to build relationships with these community organizations, because none of the work that we've been able to do would have been possible without our partnership and relationships with people who are already established in the community. I think that building relationships without needing something is really important, because typically when we're out in the community, we're either at, community events with, tabling to share information, or, where like there's a specific purpose. And, I think sometimes that, sometimes just being out there and like wanting to get to know the community is really important to show them that we just want to build a relationship. And also just acknowledging that, communication, like engagement is a learning cycle. So we're always learning on how to engage better. Thank you.
Thank you, TJ and your sharing really highlights the human-centeredness of innovation, and just so many layers of experiments in trying to figure out the best approaches, best and needs. And as I said, we will have some time at the end for questions. So I want to keep going to allow the next presenter to share her experience. I will allow Robin Rust to introduce herself and also share a little bit with us about experiments in the area of business integration and processes. So Robin, thank you for taking the time today, and I'm going to hand it over.
Thanks for having me. Like Carrie said, I'm Robin Rust. I work in the business integration section in the Office of Admin, and our team works on process improvement. And I see a lot of our customers are on this call, so hi guys, good to see everybody. And for those who I don't recognize your name, hopefully we'll get a chance to work with you at some point. So as I was listening to those guys talk about community engagement, I was really thinking experimenting isn't just dreaming up like, oh, I'm going to go try this and jumping in and trying it. I think here at MnDOT, we're a lot more deliberate, and we're thinking strategically like, oh, I think this is going to work. Let's go out and give it a shot. And so we're very planful, which I think is great. And also, as I was listening to them, I just was thinking, every time I hear from different areas at MnDOT, I'm always amazed at all of the things that we're doing and the approach that we're bringing, and thinking of that human side and how do we interact with the people. And it's just, I love working at MnDOT. I'm so glad to be here. So, but let me jump into process. So I just want to start with, when we think about process improvement, we're typically thinking about, how do you know something needs to be improved? Where do you start? When is it time to experiment? So I started thinking about one of the things that always cues me, oh, this needs to be improved, is when there's frustration. When I hear people saying, oh, and then I get to this part and it never works. Or, oh, here's where it gets super complicated, or here's where there's a bottleneck, or here's where we start guessing. Those are spots where I know there's an opportunity for some type of improvement. Another key thing to listen for is, oh, this part's really hard to explain. it's hard for me to say exactly what goes on here. I don't know what that other person does, and then it comes back to me and whatever. Sometimes improvements are prompted externally, and we'll hear, oh, well, there's new legislature, so we have to change our process. Or it could be, you know, there's a new person in the team or a new leader who wants a new report or something like that. So we are prompted by someone else that we need to have a new process. Or it could be from an IT perspective of our systems getting retired and we need a new one or something like that. Inconsistencies in process are another place where we find an opportunity for improvement. Things that are duplicative, and then also there's a list of wastes. We have the 8 wastes that we work off of. I'm sure other people have seen lists of wastes in business where we can find opportunities for improvement. So what I wanted to talk about today is we're in the process of improving ourselves and our own process. So I wanted to just share a little bit about that and how that's going on. We were prompted a little bit externally. We got a new system, a new tool in our toolbox that we could start working with in the Power Platform. And it's a new way for us to automate processes for folks. Historically, we've used the Metastorm workflow tool, and I know a lot of you on this call have experience with Metastorm. And so once Power Platform came online, and actually my co-supervisor, Chris Johnson, is right now in a meeting about an upgrade to our Power Platform. So we're really excited about having more functionality in that tool soon. But so that's kind of what prompted us to analyze our process. So the first thing that I wanted to do is I have a bunch of slides. They're going to be hard to read because it's small, but I just want you to see our process because we have our process documented. And I just wanted to look at it and kind of explain where we started and where we're planning to go. So Kayla, if I could have you advance the slide. So this is kind of a high level of our process. So we start with that, you can see on the left, we intake our process, we figure out the project plan, and this is all part of our business analyst team. So historically, we've had the business analysts do a lot of work, which you'll see here on these slides, and then we hand it off to the automation team, and then they do their work. And it can, some of our projects are in our project queue for years, and it's really challenging because if we hand it off to the automation team and then they come back with questions and it's something that the BA team has worked on 2 years ago, it's hard to remember. Oh, where were we on that? What happened with that? So, that I'll get into that in a little bit of kind of why and what was driving this. But so in this piece of our process, this is kind of our overview, and you can see that we have there's a diamond shape about 2/3 of the way across the screen that says automated workflow. If it's automated, yes, it goes to the automation team. If it's automated, no, it stays in the BA team. We do what we need to do and then wrap up the project. Can you go to the next slide, please? So this is our process for modeling, facilitating a modeling session. So this is the BA team does all of this work, working with the customer to get the whole process modeled, figure out what the current state is, and then we're looking for any of those opportunities that I mentioned earlier of where we can identify improvements, and that will come out as someone's explaining their process to us. Oh, this part gets really hard, or I'm not sure how to explain this piece. We mark those, we call them our red circle areas, and those are spots we're going to want to come back to and see if we can improve. If you could go to the next slide, please. So then we work with our automation team and create the new model. So we create the future state in collaboration with the BA team and the automation team. So up to this point, it's pretty much just been the BAs getting that whole current state and understanding the process. Then we work together to create the future state. Then, which obviously it takes a lot longer than how I'm describing it because there's a lot more steps here. Next slide, please. And then we hand it off to the automation team, which is, this is our handoff process. So we have quite a process to hand it off just to make sure that it's clear, like who owns it at this point, who's working on it, how are we going from here. So we are in the process of scrapping all of these models and working more collaboratively together with the goal of shortening the duration of projects, getting them, getting that automated workflow out to the customer, which would be all of you guys, faster, so that you can start realizing the benefits of having it sooner. And it also will help us because it's going to cut down on some of this, all of these steps in this lengthy process. So I don't have our new process. We haven't documented our future state because we're kind of building the airplane as we're flying it, which is part of what I wanted to talk about now that I kind of set the stage. So next slide, please. So what were we trying to do and learn through this process? We're really trying to reduce the time between the project request and when that automated solution is delivered. So when I look at that, I think, okay, our team, there's certain things that we really have to do. We have to understand what your current state is, and we have to know all the details, or we can't fix it and find those opportunities. So there is time that we still have to spend on there, but we're trying to figure out how do we shorten that. So the value of it is realizing those benefits of the improvements sooner. And then hopefully we're completing more projects per year, bringing more value to MnDOT through that. But also, like I mentioned before, it's really challenging when someone works on a project and then it comes back 2 years later, or it just keeps circling back. It's hard to get them just close the book on it and move forward. So I'm hoping that's something we'll see will just be more fulfilling for us as staff members to get projects closed out and move ahead instead of having them continue to swirl around, which is great for anyone using the workflow as well. If you get a complete workflow instead of one that we're trying to enhance and enhance and enhance and enhance endlessly down the road. Next slide, please. So some challenges, failures, or setbacks. We have a pretty large team between our BA team and our automation team. We have quite a few folks there. So keeping everybody on the same page can be really challenging. So we have just a lot of communication that has to happen. We're talking through these ideas. We've been talking about this for months and we're still talking about it, which is great. I think our section has a really high level of trust. So one of the great things is that there's challenges that come up. So Chris Johnson and myself as supervisors, we're helping set this vision of here's what we think it's going to look like. So we're explaining our vision to our teams, and then people are doing it. And in actual application, there's some glitches and things aren't quite working right. So creating that time and being willing to hear those challenges and talk through them of, okay, how can we make that work better? What would be a better way to do that? And so we're kind of process improving our vision as we go. Also, we've had some staff turnover during the whole thing. So getting new staff on board when we don't quite have a solid process right now is a little challenging, but I think everyone's been doing a great job. So next slide, please. So the best part has really been having our team that's willing to work together, talk through all this stuff. I think it's helped build relationships in our team. I'm sure there's frustrations, but every time we work together and we have some of those frustrations, then when you work through it, you're stronger than you were before. So that's been really great. And how do you know when it's been successful? We'll know when we start to see our projects being delivered in less time. And then also I want to see people just be confident and yep, here's our new process. This is what we do. And so right now we're kind of building it as we go, but I'm so grateful for our team and their willingness to experiment with us and get there so that we can have that better process. And I think that's all I had. If anyone has questions or comments, I'm happy to take them.
Yeah, we're gonna save time for some questions after the next presentation. But Robin, thank you
Perfect.
so much. And having experienced your team and the level of detail and skill that they have in terms of facilitating those processes and helping people across MnDOT brainstorm new and better ways of doing it. I really thank you for that. And appreciated that you kind of showed a part of that video, what they were saying, you know, that experimentation starts through different motivations and through different styles. I loved that you were talking about how deliberate you had to be in terms of determining the timing instead of just, you know, being able to jump right in. So the nature of those processes are different. And with that, we have one other project and experiment to hear about today. And I'm going to let Kohl introduce himself as well, that he has been working on one of the research implementation projects, an innovation project that is connected to, yeah, harnessing energy through solar snow fencing. So Kohl, thank you for being flying solo today. Your counterpart wasn't able to join us, so I really appreciate you stepping in and doing that as well. So take it away.
All right, well, thanks for having me. Yeah, Kohl Skalin, I'm out of MnDOT District 4 on the western part of the state where the wind really likes to blow. And so our goal is working with landowners to prevent this what you see on the screen. That's the problem, is wind blows and our snow storage goes away, and either we shut down the roads until we get snow storage back, or in this case, we're doing this proactively to remove the snow out of the median. That'll give us the ability to keep the road open during wind events. So it's done under live traffic. And so our goal is working with landowners to come up with different ways to harness that energy of blowing snow. And then with this is harness the energy of the solar. So next slide, please. So this is on existing right-of-way that we have. We were fortunate. We worked with landowner. We purchased 15 acres. And so this site was picked because we own it. So a lot of the snow fence you'll see across the agency is put in through an agreement. So we actually don't own it. We just pay a farmer to put this fence in, and then we pay them an annual fee to leave the fence there, and then for us to store snow on their property. And so this is the solar snow fence. We're working with NDSU and working on kind of how do we harness that wind energy and then ultimately provide solar energy if it was viable. Because, you know, obviously this is out in 40, 50, 60, 70 mile an hour winds, rattling and kind of all those things. So we were able to successfully deploy 100-foot long snow fence, and it was producing about 72 kilowatt an hour electricity per day on average across the 365 days. And you can see here, the statistic is that about an average household uses about 31 kilowatts. So we could basically power 2 homes with the fence that we currently have out there. And I guess we haven't got the final report as far as everything, but that'll be coming here in June. And so there'll be more to come on kind of the successfulness. And we plan to leave this, part of the contract is leave it and then see the viability for long-term, because our structural snow fence, let's go to the next slide. Structural snow fence that we currently have, you know, you see here has 30 to 40-year life cycles is what our targets are. And this is the exact same site that the fence is on. It is actually down on this end where it kind of makes a bend. And then this is a close-up picture. It starts right here and then goes back. So this was taken the year before. You know, the fence is 8 feet tall, and the drift is all of 8 feet tall and a couple 100 feet wide. So this fence is designed to store about 20 tons per lineal foot of snow. Next slide. So this is kind of in the summer. You know, our traditional snow fence, there's 2 manufacturers, one out of Minnesota and then one out of Idaho. They use an I-beam or an HSS type, kind of 2-post, and they use a different type of sleeve. This one uses a round post and a different type of footing. So a completely different design they came up with. They felt this was the better of the two. So, you know, it's not yet for an approved product for the future, but it's something that we're really looking at. And you can see that the university has a camera up there at the top of the picture where they're monitoring the site conditions continually to see how the item is, you know, how it's working. So next slide. So yeah, our traditional, you'll see on the left, wherever you see in the snow fence above the ground is what it's below ground. So if it's an 8-foot fence, it gets an 8-foot footing down, pounded in the ground through a means of either, skid steer or some other type of mechanism to drive the post. So it's loud, it's vibratory, and all those things. And then the university, they went a different route, and then with a helical sleeve. So you just drill it and use the same kind of tool, but you don't use the pounding to drive it into the soil. It just screws itself down into the soil. So that's another thing that we thought was, potential very viable for the future. Next slide. So this is just kind of their little hut. It's storing the batteries that take the energy from the site. You can see the black panels down below. We really couldn't do anything with the energy because one, we can't sell anything back to the grid yet because due to legislation, but we thought, well, what could we do with the energy? And one of the concerns that landowners have farmers in particular, not so much landowners, the farmer that's either operating or renting the land or owning the land. When you put 20 ton of lineal foot of snow, that's a lot of snow, and it's got to take a long time to melt, right? And so their issue is, they got maybe you're going to get in that section of the field a week later or 2 weeks later. And so the university thought, well, hey, let's see if we could use the energy to melt snow. And so that's what you actually see there is heating pads that are actually melt snow that lands on it from the snow fence. So they have these little black mats out in front of the snow fence that continually melt the snow to basically kind of maybe offset that for a landowner, or the potential, to help with that. So it was just something we thought we'd try to use some of the energy some way, shape, or form versus just keep putting energy into the batteries that didn't really need it. So next slide. So yeah, that's just the snow fence. And, kind of in the summer when it's nice and sunny, and then you get, obviously this was just forming. This was up towards the end of the year last year as the snow was receding and melting, and we're just trying to monitor how it was going. You can see them by the first fence post right down here, one of the pads. They don't have a lot of the pads out there. They just have a couple just to see if it would melt, and it is melting the snow. So it works. I was very skeptical when we went into this project. I didn't think that the panels would hold up, and the university did a lot of research in what type of composite material they wanted to use, and how they wanted to support it, and they really thought this project through when we asked them to look into this. And really, it'll probably give us the option to look at round posts and helicals to easily remove that fence if we have to. So I think I have one more slide, or Dan did. No, never mind. So the other thing too with the helical sleeves that I'd mentioned is, they don't require concrete. Currently, the fence that you see, down over here, that is, on the end treatments, they require concrete sleeves that go down 8 feet. And so those are really hard to remove if a landowner, not in this case because we own the land, but a lot of landowners, if they'll ask us to remove it or they're done with the agreement after 15 years, how to get an 8-foot, deep footing out without really disturbing their field is fairly difficult. So that was, with that helical, it might give us another option as we move forward with advancing kind of, designs of snow fence, since we are putting more and more in to try to protect our network and reduce the amount of snow, ending up on the roadway. So that's all I have.
Great, thank you, Kohl. It's so interesting to see, out in the field, just the whole process and steps and the different pieces of equipment. And I can see already that we have a question in the chat for you. And the question is, what is the cost differential between regular fencing and solar, and the value in dollars of the electricity produced? If you're able to speak to that a little bit.
So right now we can't. That's actually one of the requirements in the final report. They're actually going to do that costing, and they're trying to look at it from a larger scale. Just 100 feet of fence is, was X cost, right? But now if you could do it in mass production and stuff. So that was part of the findings that the university needs to come out with and, see the viability of it.
Great. Other questions for any of our panelists today? Michael.
Yeah, Cole, I've always been fascinated by how the snow fencing works. I mean, it seems like the design of it leaves some gaps between the various panels in the fencing, and it does manage to block most of the blowing snow. But how much snow is actually able to get through those gaps during a typical snowstorm or blowing snow event?
So the fence is actually meant to trip the snow, to create a trip point. So you'll notice on this fence, we're running 25% porosity. So 25% is allowing it to get through. And then if you have less of a problem, when I say less of a problem, less of a fetch distance. So, out in western Minnesota, the fetch distance here is probably 10 miles that a snowflake could travel before it gets tripped by something because of the massive farm field. So they have a 50% porosity also. And so that allows more snow through. So on a 25%, you have the upwind drift that's bigger. And on a 50%, you have the downwind drift that's bigger. So that really depends on the offset. The key to the whole fence working is all those slats, and then there has to be a bottom gap. So you'll see maintenance crews out here weed whipping or stuff that's going into fall. If the bottom gap's not there, it will not work because the fence, it's tripping the snow, and then that bottom gap is actually having kind of just forcing air up, and then it knocks the snowflake down. So that's why you see that fence set back at, I'll just say on average, roughly 120 feet from the shoulder PI, because it needs that much so you don't create a blowout. We call it the blowout zone. It's really just creating a mini blizzard on the downwind side of the fence, and then that, tripping that fence, or that's straight tripping that snow to this land right there and stop, taking all the energy out of it.
Any other questions today for my TJ, Robin, or Kohl? Got anything that you've heard? Okay. Yes.
I'll chime in real quick. Carrie, I'll chime in real quick. This is Matt Shams. I just want to put a plug in for Robin and her group. I'm involved in some, because what I think is important to realize is a lot of our innovation is intra-agency innovation. How do we deal with one another? How do we collaborate with one another? And Robin's team is doing some great work on a project that I'm involved in with the Regional Transportation Management Center in terms of our communications and collaborations and decision-making processes related to the RTMC. So I just, again, kudos to Robin and her group. And if there's processes within MnDOT, I think they are very well suited to assist with those. So I thought I'd just throw that plug in.
Yes, and that's a good point. If anyone wants to follow up with any of our panelists directly after this to learn more, please feel free to do that. I see one more, and yes, and Robin's team is, like I said, they've been spectacularly supportive and helpful at times when we've had questions. Cool, I see a question in the chat. Why are the panels not tilted up towards the sky a little bit? If you could share your thoughts on that. Thank you for the question, Lauren.
Yep, we when you looked at all the studies, and Dan would have been able to answer this a little bit better, but there's a whole bunch of engineering behind this. And so it has to be basically perpendicular with the ground. So it has to have that 90-degree edge to knock the snowflake down. If we were to angle them a little bit, it would cause a little bit more energy to get through and then extend the fence, or sorry, extend the snowdrift out. There was talk about that. And we chose to leave it exactly like we want for just the snow fence portion to actually perform like the, what we need from a snow fence perspective, and then see what we could get on the energy side. So there were discussions about putting panels directly on the top of the fence, so they could just stay on the top and then get more energy that way. We have concerns with the shading from the drift onto the fence, and so that's exactly what we're hoping to get out of the study here when it gets the final report. But the reason, the reason was that's how we wanted to perform, just like our other snow fence in the study.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yeah, like Kohl, when is the project or this phase of it expected to ramp up? Just curious about the timeline.
I think it's June of 24 is when we're going to be done. We're going through this winter season because we got 2 winter seasons under it, one very extreme, and now we have one that's been very mild. It was actually good for the study. And then we'll, I think by June of 24 is their final report out.
Interesting data sets. Yeah. All right. In our last couple of minutes, really just want to thank our presenters again today for helping us walk through the worlds in experimentation and innovation in different work areas. It's so valuable, and I really appreciate everybody's time to connect and share today. This last part, we really just wanted to give you ways to engage and connect after today. We have an innovation portal at MnDOT that you can connect to through iHub that is really all about sharing innovations, submitting ideas that need support, and also just learning about innovation through the resources that are there. And do we have any more slides? We have a Teams channel for innovation, and you can also subscribe to our innovation newsletter. I will send out the PowerPoint deck today, so you can have the links if you weren't able to get them from the chat. You can find them in this PowerPoint, and certainly connect with me if you have any questions. And yeah, just thank you so much for being a part of these. They're always such a bright spot in a week. So thanks again to our presenters, for everybody for your attention and great questions. Hope to see you at our next webinar. Thank you, everyone.